It's a Saturday afternoon. You're at brunch. Not because you budgeted for brunch, you didn't. But someone posted on Instagram that this place has bottomless mimosas, and the table looked beautiful, and you needed to be somewhere beautiful this weekend. The eggs Benedict arrive. You take 3 photos before you touch them. You split the check, and when your card declines on the first attempt, you tell the group it's probably a chip reader issue. It wasn't a chip reader issue. You go home. You open your banking app. You close it immediately. That's not a money problem. That's a performance problem wearing a money costume. And you've been rehearsing it for so long, you forgot you were performing. I'm Sloan Reed. I spent 8 years as a clinical psychologist before I realized that the majority of my patients weren't struggling with anxiety in the clinical sense. They were struggling with the gap between who they needed people to believe they were and who their bank account confirmed they actually were. That gap has a name, several names, depending on what level of the pathology you're operating at. Subscribe if you want the diagnosis. I don't do gentle around here, so. Fake rich. I'm going to be precise about what I mean by that term because it gets used loosely, and loose language lets people off the hook. Fake rich is not being aspirational. It's not working towards something. It's not putting your best foot forward in a job interview or wearing a suit you saved for. Fake rich is the systematic performance of a financial life you do not have, executed at a cost that guarantees you will never have it. It is behavioral, it is psychological, and it runs on a mechanism that every clinician recognizes: intermittent social reinforcement. Someone compliments your car, someone asks where you vacation, someone looks at you differently when you pull out the card at dinner, and that look, that 5-second hit of being perceived as the person you want to be, becomes the drug. And the drug is expensive. There are levels. And most people who are running this pattern don't know which level they're on. They think they're doing a little better than they are. They think the problem is temporary, situational, almost under control. It is not temporary, it is structural. And the structure has 7 floors. Let's go up. Level 1, the optics investment. This is where it starts. You're not broke at this level. You're just spending money on the wrong signal. The person at level 1 has a reasonable income, maybe even a good income. But their financial decisions are consistently made with one filter. Will this make me look like someone who has it together? They buy the apartment in the neighborhood with the right name, even though it means living alone in a studio the size of a boat cabin with no kitchen counter space and a window that faces a ventilation shaft. They buy the car that reads professional 3 years before they can actually afford it. They wear the brand that signals the industry they want to be perceived as thriving in, not the one they're actually thriving in. None of this is catastrophic at level 1. The numbers technically still add up, but the orientation is already corrupted. Every financial decision is routed through a social perception filter before it hits a practical one. What will this say about me? Before can I sustain this? Your bank account is a receipt of your beliefs. And at level 1, the belief is, being perceived as successful is worth paying for. That belief doesn't stay cheap. Level 2, the lifestyle loan. At level 2, the optics investment has started to run a deficit, and the solution chosen is credit. Not credit for emergencies, not credit as a tool deployed strategically, paid down methodically, credit as a substitute for income, credit as the financial backing for a character who earns more than you do. The credit card at level 2 carries a balance that hasn't been zero in 18 months. Not because there was a medical emergency or a job loss, because the person at level 2 went to Cancun in March, bought a sectional sofa in June, signed up for a gym they use twice a week because the app on the phone makes them feel like someone who works out, and got the MacBook Pro because anything else would have looked embarrassing in the coffee shop. I had a patient once, and I'm going to tell you this the way it actually happened, not the cleaned up version, who was paying $340 a month in minimum payments across 4 credit cards, had approximately $120 in savings, and had just spent $600 on a weekend trip to celebrate a friend's birthday. When I asked her what she thought about the trip decision given the numbers, she said, "I couldn't not go. I would have looked like I was struggling." She was struggling. She had been struggling for 2 years. The performance of not struggling was the engine of the struggle. Level 2 runs on shame management. The spending isn't about pleasure, or not only about pleasure, it's about controlling how you're seen. And credit is the mechanism that makes that control feel possible without requiring an income that actually supports it. The tragedy is structural. The more you spend to look like you're not drowning, the faster you drown. Level 3, the asset costume. This is where it gets sophisticated. This is where the fake rich pattern stops looking like overspending and starts looking like wealth. Level 3 is the 72-month car loan on a vehicle that broadcasts a tax bracket you are not in. Level 3 is the financed watch that sits in the same drawer as a credit card statement. Level 3 is the business class seat, booked on points accumulated by maxing a card that hasn't been paid off since 2021. The person at Level 3 has learned to generate the aesthetic of assets without the substance of assets. They own things that look expensive. They do not own things that appreciate. They have liabilities that require monthly payments. They do not have net worth that compounds. Here's the clinical piece. At Level 3, the gap between performance and reality has become large enough that the person cannot close it without admitting it first. And admission would collapse the performance. So the performance must be maintained, which requires more spending, which requires more credit, which widens the gap further. This is a reinforcement loop. The external validation keeps the behavior running. Each compliment on the car is a reinforcement. Each time someone says, "You always look so put together," is a reinforcement. Each time they're included in a social circle they associate with a financial tier above their actual one, that's a reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is the most powerful schedule in behavioral psychology. It's why slot machines are more addictive than vending machines. The hit doesn't come every time, but it comes often enough and unpredictably enough that you keep pulling the lever. The lever at Level 3 is a credit card. Level 4, the income illusion. We are now at the level where the pattern has become an identity. Level 4 is characterized by income that sounds impressive, a lifestyle that confirms that impression, and a financial interior that is hollow. This is the person who earns $180,000 and has $4,000 saved. This is the couple with the mortgage they were approved for at the absolute ceiling of their qualification, the 2 car payments, the private school tuition they're supplementing with a HELOC they explained as a renovation loan, and the annual vacation they fund by telling themselves they'll pay it off when the bonus comes. The bonus comes, it goes somewhere else. There's always somewhere else. I want to be honest with you about what I'm describing because the temptation here is to read Level 4 as a story about stupidity, and it is not. The people I saw at Level 4, and I saw many of them, in suits and in sneakers, in both coasts and in between, were not dumb. They were trapped in an identity. The income level they reached required years of work. The lifestyle that identity demanded expanded in proportion. And somewhere in there, the lifestyle stopped being a reward for the work and became a requirement for the self. You don't just want the things, you need them to confirm that the work mattered, that you are the person you have been performing. Sit down, that's the mechanism. You spent 20 years becoming someone, and that someone needs a house that looks a certain way, needs to take the family somewhere in the summer, needs to show up to the reunion in a car that says, "The decisions I made were the right ones." And you are funding that confirmation with money you do not have. Level 5, the social structure. At Level 5, fake rich is no longer just a personal pattern. It's been externalized into a social architecture. The person at level 5 has built a life, friendships, relationships, social circles, professional networks, around a financial presentation that is not accurate. The people around them believe the performance, not because they're deceived in a malicious sense, but because the performance has been consistent, detailed, and maintained over years. This is clinically significant because the social architecture now enforces the behavior. When your friend group expects a certain standard of restaurant, you go. When your neighborhood expects a certain standard of exterior, you maintain it. When your professional circle plans a trip and expects you to join, you find the money, somehow, from somewhere, from a line of credit you didn't tell anyone about, because opting out would require an explanation you are not prepared to give. The social structure at level 5 is not a network. It's a hostage situation. You are financially captive to the expectations of people who don't actually know your balance sheet. Be honest, with me, with yourself. Pick one. How many of the things you paid for in the last 12 months were paid for because the people around you expected them of you? Level 6, the generational transfer. This is the level that makes me slow down. Because at level 6, the fake rich pattern has been exported to children. The kid in private school whose parents are one bad quarter away from pulling them out, but haven't told them that. The teenager who has been handed a debit card connected to a line of credit, raised with no functional understanding of what things cost, and socialized in a peer group that confirms the family's financial presentation every single day. The parents at level 6 are not malicious. I want to be clear about that. They are in many cases doing exactly what they wish someone had done for them. They are giving their children access to a life that signals safety and belonging and opportunity, and they are simultaneously raising children who will arrive at adulthood with no framework for the relationship between money and reality. Children who have been socialized to treat financial appearance as a survival skill. Children who will likely run this exact pattern themselves because it's the only one they've ever seen modeled and it seemed to work. The generation trauma of fake rich isn't debt. It's the belief, transmitted without words, that what you appear to have matters more than what you actually have. That belief gets expensive fast when the parents aren't there to absorb the costs anymore. Level 7, the collapse architecture. Level 7 is not a lifestyle. Level 7 is a structure that is mathematically guaranteed to collapse under any significant stress. There is no emergency fund. There may be retirement accounts that have been raided or borrowed against. There are multiple lines of credit, some of them at interest rates that should be criminal, some of them in the name of an LLC the person told themselves was for business. There is a mortgage with an adjustable rate that hasn't adjusted yet. There is a payment deferred during a hardship period that is about to undefer. There is a family member who was lent money that was never formalized as a loan because formalizing it would have made the desperation visible. The person at level 7 is not in crisis because they made bad decisions. They're in crisis because they made years of decisions that were each individually defensible and collectively catastrophic. Each decision was made in the context of, this is what I need to maintain the life I've built and the person I've become. Each decision, viewed in isolation, was about managing an immediate problem. The credit card bridged a gap. The loan to the family member was necessary. The retirement account withdrawal was temporary. Viewed in aggregate, those decisions built a structure with no load-bearing walls. Any storm takes it down. A job loss, a medical bill, a divorce, a market shift. The storm doesn't have to be extraordinary. The structure is so fragile that an ordinary storm is enough. And the terrible part, the part that I watched break people in my practice, is that the last thing to go is the performance. Even at the edge, even at the precipice, even when the calls are coming and the numbers are undeniable, there is a part of the person at level 7 who is still managing what it looks like. That's how powerful this pattern is. It persists past the point where it can serve any function. It runs on its own logic. Here is what I want you to sit with. Fake rich is not about money. That's the thing nobody says out loud, but it's the only useful thing to say. Fake rich is a status regulation strategy deployed by people who were taught, explicitly or implicitly, that what you appear to have is the currency that purchases safety, belonging, and worth. That lesson came from somewhere. It came from a parent who cared too much about what the neighbors thought, from a childhood where money was scarce but appearances were maintained anyway, from a social context that priced belonging in a currency you couldn't naturally afford, from an industry or profession where the performance of success is a prerequisite for the opportunity to succeed. None of that means the pattern doesn't need to end. It does need to end. The pattern is eating your future in installments. But the moment of softness I'll give you before I go is this. You did not develop this because you are shallow or weak or broken. You developed it because it worked, sometimes. The compliment landed. The circle accepted you. The promotion came through. The reinforcement was real. The problem is that intermittent reinforcement doesn't stop because the behavior becomes too expensive. It stops when you decide, consciously, that you are no longer available to be controlled by someone else's perception of you. That decision is harder than opening a savings account. It is harder than cancelling subscriptions. It is harder than any tactical financial advice you will ever receive. So here's the question I'll leave you with, and I'm not going to answer it for you because answering it for you would be the gentle version, and you didn't come here for gentle. If the people around you knew the actual number, the real one, the one on the screen when you don't close the app fast enough, would you still be performing for them? And if the answer is no, ask yourself what that means about what you're actually buying.